Welcome to Bourbon and Breaches, where we cover one of our favorite bourbons and the top 5 most interesting breaches from this last week. You've got the Hacknose team here. I'm Steve.
Mike.
Hey, I'm Nikki.
This is Miguel.
Great. So let's jump right in. Well, actually, before we do, I did want to ask a question of Nikki. So, Nikki, so far you've been wowing us with some of your shirts from the last weeks. I think last week was a taco shirt. What's going on this week?
Well, this week on the fashion line, we have a shirt. It is breathable. It is white. It is covered in pineapples.
I thought those were peanuts.
No, they're pineapples.
Okay.
And the exciting part about this shirt is I got this maybe like 6 years ago, and I can't ever wear it except for times like these because it's covered in stains. But because of this little square, you can't see all the stains, where it's like ramen, it's like ketchup, so
That was a shirt right for COVID.
yeah.
That was just hanging in the closet waiting for a global pandemic.
I saw it, took a shower this morning, and I was like, that's the shirt. That's it.
That's a subtle flex on actually showering today. Well, with that non sequitur, I'm very excited because this week our bourbon is Maker's Mark. And I have it, and Nikki has it as well. Don't you have it, Nikki? You got
I just got a bottle earlier today.
Next to your taco shirt. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up their site. But one of the reasons that I am excited is Maker's is by far my favorite daily bourbon. It's not, maybe not the best sipping bourbon I've had, maybe not the most special bourbon I've had, but on the scale of do I drink it daily versus, anything else, Maker's is it. Go into a bar, it's always Maker's, if they have it, which they almost always do. So Maker's is a fun bourbon because they do all these crazy things. So first off, they always dip their bottles in this red wax. And I've heard that if you go to their distillery, they will sell you an ungodly amount of items made out of red wax. They must buy this by the ton. They hand dip every bottle. And little known fact, Maker's is owned by Suntory. So Suntory, famous Japanese whiskey distillery company, they bought Maker's, I don't know how many decades ago. So it's actually a Suntory brand. So for a good time, make it a Suntory time. So Maker's, we've got their site up here. They have pretty much just Maker's. That's what they sell. You can get it in different strengths. So you can get Maker's 46, which is just a little bit stronger. Maker's Mark cask strength, which is just straight out of the cask. And then they've started to do these private finishes and selections. So they've started to get creative. They will re-age their Maker's with different wood slats. And I've even seen you can special order Maker's with different wood slat finishes to give it different charred oak flavors. So that's a little bit about Maker's. Maker's is also one of the most well-known wheated bourbon. So as we talked about in our last episode, bourbon is at least 50% corn, but for the mash bill, once you get to 50% corn or 51% corn, you can play around with the rest of it. Some people like to add in rye, some people like to add in wheat. Maker's has a very distinctive flavor, I think, because it's not only wheated, but it's malted. So I pulled up a site here that actually had the mash bill, 70% corn, 16% wheat, and the 14% malt. And I think the wheat really gives it a nice light, sweet flavor. The malt gives it, I think, a lot of its distinctive flavoring. It is a lot of that. I mean, it's hard to compare it to beer, but if you've ever had just a really sweet, pleasant beer, it's got a lot of that flavor to it. And then a little bit more background. It is, of course, in Kentucky outside of Loretto. And I think that's it. So let's go ahead and pour some makers.
Have you tried all of the different variations of Maker's Mark, Steve?
I have tried a lot of variations of Maker's Mark. So I've had Maker's 46, Maker's Cask Strength. Fun enough, I was in Tokyo, and I was in the Tokyo Whiskey Library, and I wanted to start off with one that I knew. So I had the Maker's Cask Strength, which was by way of Suntory from Kentucky back to Japan. So I've tried all of those, and then I've tried a few of the special finishes. The thing they do with their special finishes is there could be thousands of different finishes that they use. So there could be a lot of different varieties of makers, and it's only going to change the flavor ever so slightly. So Nikki, you got your makers?
I also have my makers.
Good. So quick little rundown. Nice toffee color. Makers is known for smelling really sweet. So, and fruity. I like to think of it as on the nose, you get a lot of caramel and burnt sugar, but I think it's almost a cherry fruitiness to it. And compared to the flavor, it's much sweeter on the nose than on the flavor. It's not an overwhelmingly sweet bourbon. It's got some sweetness to it. You know, I still get a little bit of that cherry on it. Maybe it's from the aroma. Maybe it's from the flavor. But what I love about it is it's got this really distinctive mouthfeel. It just feels really like silky smooth. And then it doesn't go away. Like if you take a sip of Makers, you will continue to taste Makers for a long period of time after having had that. And so Makers just sort of sticks with you, sticks in your mouth for a long time. Not much else to Makers. It's available everywhere. Unfortunately, as opposed to last week, I'm sure they've won multiple awards for it, but we just don't have a nice little label. If you work for Makers and if you've won a double gold from the San Francisco bourbon contest, let us know, because we'd be happy to tell people. You know, Makers, well-known bourbon. One of the best things about it is the price. So, you know, it ran an ad campaign years ago saying, Makers, if it looks expensive, that's because it is, or if it tastes expensive, that's because it is. They really set out early on to make themselves an expensive bourbon, but quite the opposite. I buy it by the half gallon, and you know, we're talking about $30 or even less than $30 for a typical 750 milliliter bottle. So very affordable if you're on a budget, and still something that you can, you know, nicely sip. Without further ado, let's jump into the data breaches.
First one comes out of ZDNet. Headline reads, info of 27.7 million Texas drivers exposed in Vertafore data breach. Vertafore data breach. Top line, Vertafore is an insurance provider or insurance software provider. And they basically just took ownership of the fact that sometime between March 11th and August 1st, there was human error that resulted in files being unsecurely stored, and obviously from the headline, 27.7 million data points at least are available on the dark web. Now, the firm didn't find any evidence, but they of any hackers going in there and taking advantage of the human error that was made in-house. But they are Vertafore is preaching caution and offering free credit monitoring and identity restoration services because they're basically saying, "Yep, we messed up. Sorry about that. Let's get you a couple of protection services because our bad." Good question to kick this off is that enough?
So let me add a wrinkle to the story, and then I want to talk about it. So I hate everything about this story, but I tried, because I'm in Texas, I tried to sign up for their identity theft services, and I got this message. So not only did we have a company that somehow got my driver's license information because I'm in Texas, and then mismanaged it and let hackers get it. That would be bad enough, but I can't even sign up for their free identity theft. So thankfully I have identity theft from like 5 other places, but this is just the final cherry on the shit sundae, because I couldn't even sign up for what they're offering. The biggest problem I have with this data breach is I don't know who this company is. I have no relationship with them, and yet they hurt me.
And a license is something that you have to get, something that you have to have. So you're just kind of thrown into that situation where...
This is one of the reasons that understanding third-party risk is really important, and one of the reasons that we work in third-party risk, and I spent so much of my career in third-party risk, is because I believe that the company that we're talking about is a solutions provider to other insurance companies. And so it's the insurance companies that have the state issued ID or a copy or the driver's license number. And I think that they're handling their customer data is the insurance customer data, which is your consumer data. And so it's a third party of your service provider who actually lost the data. And that's the weakest link, right? Because it seems far more difficult to do something like attack a super large insurance company that's spending millions and millions and millions of dollars on security. But once the data leaves that infrastructure and enters another infrastructure where it's going to be handled by somebody and left, as you said, in an insecure server, that's tough.
Well, shouldn't it be like some sort of consent? Let's say that if a company is like trading, so to speak, your information, you should give your consent. I mean, in order for the company to do that, because one thing would be to willingly, like you said, Steve, provide your information to a company. But if that company is going to be trading that info, at least you should be noticed the way that I see it.
Yeah, that would be great, but that's not how it currently works in the U.S. There's no federal data breach law or even federal data management law in the U.S. California added a law, but a lot of these laws are really poorly thought out, or really poorly written. They need to very specifically be targeting companies that are trading in people's data in mass. A lot of these laws can be very vague about what data is protected, and they apply to everyone, right? I have a responsibility for protecting my users' data that they give to me. But I'm operating in a very different way than this company here. My users are actively giving me their data. This company just took it, right? And so that's a big problem. There's no concept of consent when it comes to data.
Yeah, that's bad.
All right, ready for number 2?
Yep.
All right. So our number 2 data breach that we'll be covering today is provided by InfoSecurity. The headline reads, "Hackers steal 46 million records from kids game developer." I don't know if anybody has kids here or if they throw apps at their kids, but Utah-based developer WildWorks describes Animal Jam as a virtual world in which children aged 4 to 8 years old can play online games with other 4 to 8-year-old children. I thought it was a crazy concept, but apparently there's around 46 million account records that were stolen by these hackers in this breach. And what are y'all's thoughts on this?
I think we are just beyond the breach. I think, on a side note, that we're starting way too soon with the online world. I mean, if kids are playing from age 4, and I get it, and I'm definitely not against kids playing a game. Definitely not against that. I mean, they should. I mean, it's fun, it's entertaining. But to need to go into a social world online to do that, I think it's way too premature the way that I see it, just as a side note.
Yeah, I agree with Miguel. I understand a developer making a game and wanting to have accounts, and I understand those accounts being associated with an email. That's all very standard. But I think we really have to think about how we treat anyone under 18. And I think that there should be a period where if you're under 18, you don't need an email to make an account. Or maybe we need some sort of way of having disposable emails, but I think that one of the most scary things is that child identity theft is a huge racket. People will look for social security numbers of children and exploit them because children are much less savvy. They're not going to be monitoring their credit. They're not going to be monitoring really anything having to do with their identity. And parents usually don't either. Parents are much more concerned about their own identity. And so, yeah, it's incredibly scary. Once you start accepting information from children or from people that are under 18, I think that you take on a responsibility to safeguard that. But there's got to be a better way. Can't we have, these kids have accounts and do it in a safe way where it's a disposable email that just disappears once they're 18? Kids can learn a lot from interacting with technology, but it's always a danger. Now that the internet's always on, you're always connected. And you should take precautions, and parents should be smart. They should be making throwaway email accounts that are not really associated with the kid. They should also lie about the kid's name and age, and just completely lie and make sure that the kid is guarded. But everything that you do online is recorded, and it's never going away. And as early as you put these kids online, that's when they start possibly being a victim. So.
All right, number 3 on this week's roundup for the data breaches comes from Bleeping Computer. Headline reads, popular stock photo service hit by data breach, 8.3 million records for sale. The stock photo site is called 123RF. They are reported to have about 8.3 million user records that have been hacked, found on a forum. They receive over 26 million visitors per month. And from samples of the database seen, they contain full name, email, hashed passwords, companies, phone numbers, addresses, PayPal email. I don't know why that's tied in there, but IP address. And luckily, because it's a free stock photo site, there's no financial information stored. But with all the points that were just listed prior, it just seems like a lot, especially for a service that is kind of promoting free stuff. They took a lot of information. What do you guys think about it?
So, one is marketing site thankfully not a lot of financial details, although like having a PayPal email makes you vulnerable to PayPal phishing attacks. So that's a concern. And then, 8 million's a relatively small number. It sucks for those 8 million, but, it's still pretty small. And we should already have this. Miguel
We do.
can double check
Yeah.
on that. Oh, we already do?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. Have we had this for a while?
Yes, it's been a few months now. I don't think,
Yeah.
I mean, even though it's been published recently, that's been there for a while. I mean, available in those non-sanctum forums.
Yeah, it's weird, Nikki. We already have this. We already knew about this.
Maybe it's
I'm
a
wondering,
slow news day.
is it they got hacked again, or it's not news, it's olds?
Ready for number 4?
Let's do it.
Yep.
All right. Data breach number 4 comes to us directly by way of Android police. Pluto TV likely suffered a security breach affecting 3.2 million accounts. And because it is a free channel that offers free content with ads, it's they're saying it's all good because there's no credit card info at stake. But accounts still contain names, addresses, passwords, birthdays, device platforms, IP addresses. The only thing that looks like they're missing is blood type. It's all over the place. With almost everyone able to offer free services or free something online, but requiring certain information, do you believe that there is such thing as anything for free on the internet? What are your thoughts?
So you joke about them not having blood type, but I swear there was a porn site that got breached within the last 12 months that included blood type.
What?
That's crazy.
But why? But why?
So that's a cultural thing. Evidently, in Japan, blood type is a thing. People use it as some sort of matchmaking thing, where they believe that people with different blood types may be more or less compatible.
It's like extreme horoscope, but
right
with blood.
Yeah. It's a slightly more scientific way of dealing with compatibility, and there's a dating site / porn site. I don't really know which, but probably both. And it included blood type, and it got breached, and people's blood type was stolen. Not that would really, I guess if they wanted to harvest a kidney or something, they could find you, but otherwise, not that would actually help the hackers in a lot of ways. What are we talking about again?
I don't think, to answer your question, Nikki, I don't think there's such a thing as a free stuff or freebies. Not only in the internet.
Especially when people, like, sometimes it would be offered, start your account for $5, or just give your email address, license number, blood type. It's almost like cost comparative at the very beginning. What is it worth, this money right now, or a possible this shady organization is going to lose all of my information, and then I have to deal with that. Like,
when I first heard this story, my first thought was, Pluto TV still exists? And then I thought, did they just fake this data breach to let people know that they still exist?
Like a PR stunt?
Get notoriety.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's a humble brag to say that they lost 3 million subscribers. It's like, really, Pluto TV? Really? You had 3 million? You just had to slip that in there. Hey, there's 3 million of us and growing. Would you also like your identity stolen?
Yeah, if it is a marketing ploy, that would be like probably the stupidest marketing ploy ever, because it's like
unless
shooting
somebody read
yourself in
this article and was like, oh, they have all the old TV shows that I really like.
Mm-hmm. For
and obviously
free.
and I would assume that they're fixing all of these issues right now. So if
And
I
they're
sign
more
up,
secure than before. No, that was my exact thought. My only takeaway from this is I should check out Pluto TV. It might have some stuff that I like, and I only have to watch ads.
so it works to some degree.
Yeah. I hope they didn't leak the data for marketing, but if they did, it kind of worked.
Savage.
Yeah. So
It's
Pluto
definitely
TV.
out of the box thinking.
Aggressive move, and sometimes it pays off. We'll see
Pluto
how
TV. If you don't care about your identity, it's free.
I would say if you don't care, it's free.
That's the tagline right there, because I mean that's a lot of accounts, and it doesn't say if that's all of them. Maybe they had more than 3 million. Like it's just.
But if it's free, what'd they steal?
Well, if it's free, they still have to create an account.
Yeah, but people create accounts with us, and like we don't make them tell the truth. We're like, "What's your name?" And I was looking through some of the recent names. There's a lot of jack offs in our system. So,
well, maybe they listen to your advice on one of the previous videos.
Right. They're lying about who they are, and I
Yeah.
commend them, because we don't need their name. They can put whatever they want in that box. We just need, whenever we send them an email, it'll be "Dear Jackoff."
If they're having a bad day, that's just going to be just the chef's
that's
kiss.
on them. That's on them.
Well, yep. Pluto TV is still a thing, and 3.2 million accounts were affected. But yeah.
The thing about makers is when you buy it in bulk, it's hard to lift. Like it becomes a chore.
It's because of the awkward shape.
Although, no joke, if I could buy a barrel, I would. I mean, it would be clunky and annoying. I'd probably put it over there or something. But if I could buy
but you wouldn't lift it more than once. I mean, just when
I'd
you need to
figure out a
transport it.
way. Yeah, I'd get like a siphon. I'd put it on tap. Oh,
Yeah,
makers on
house.
tap would be
Run
great.
it through the house.
Oh, yeah. The more you buy, the heavier it gets.
The more you drink, also, the heavier it gets.
The lighter it gets.
There's an inflection point, though.
It's slowly getting lighter.
Okay, ready for number 5?
Let's do it.
Okay,
Yep.
It's too bad Shu's not here, because this is happening in his backyard. Let me share my screen. So the last breach that we'll be covering today that came out on the weekly roundup is straight from KOMO. I like to call it Como News. And that's the Seattle news station. I don't know how to properly refer to them, but this is an interesting story in that, well, first, the headline: "We were hacked. A local business warns about data theft from their Facebook account." So basically, there is a small business. They do like environmentally friendly manufacturing clothing. They're called Lumber Union. I'll just read it. That will sound better. "A Seattle small business, Lumber Union, makes fashion apparel with manufacturing processes that use environmentally friendly means to process cotton that is 100% grown, milled, and sewn in America." So basically, they were building the business for years. They had created a process that took many steps. It's basically a trade secret that probably nobody else would want to redo because it was just so extensive. But they built it over years, and they were working with third parties. So they built it over years, and they were starting to build their lists and do all of their marketing efforts and start selling. And they wanted to ramp it up. So they started using third parties to handle their data, and I think that third party was actually handling its Facebook ad account, and that's where they got infiltrated. The CEO admits that they weren't following adequate online security protocols, like regularly updating passwords or employing two-factor authentication. But he was looking at all their metrics and he was like, yeah, this is when everything just turned sideways. It was August of this year. Even through the pandemic, they were still going strong with all their plans and, going through with their goals. But August, some hiccup happened. They looked into it and they hit third party handling their Facebook ad account, probably did something a little bit wrong and everything went out of whack. This happened in August. And as this story released last week, that was when they did the follow-up. And, the CEO was saying that they just got a hold of a Facebook rep to help them out. I mean, like, if this is going to be the source point of everything going wrong and them starting to reach out August, maybe September, and, 2 months later, starting to get a call back from a rep and getting help from Facebook, it's kind of tough, for them because they have nothing to do. They're just kind of, okay, we got hacked. Okay, we don't know what is happening within all of our, what is tainted, what is good, how do we proceed? They're not confident as of now. I mean, they've been in business since 2015, so it's 5 years now. But it is tough to see a small business getting affected like that and not getting help from, first, who do you go to? The hacking police. And then you go to a Facebook expert rep who's handling your ad account. It's kind of tough. What do you guys think about it?
Have you been to their website?
Lumber Union?
Mm-hmm.
Is it? That looks about right.
So I'm just gonna leave their site on the screen while I talk about this. I feel like they've got a very distinctive brand, and I feel like they'll bounce back. I did not know who they were, but now I clearly do. I found a distinctive lack of lumber, and also a distinctive lack of flannel on their site. They had some plaid, but when I hear Lumber Union, I expect flannel, heavy duty denim, and lots of beards. And I did not see any of
2
that.
out of 3.
So, according to the breach, I was very confused by the breach. It sounded like their Facebook was hacked, not their website. And, I don't really know what results that would have. Very, very murky. But just goes to show no business, no matter how many underwear models they have on their site, is immune to hackers. I think that's it. Final thoughts?
Today was a weird one. It is the mix of topics it's a real weird one. So
You picked the topics.
it was the interesting ones that hit the hardest at the moment, but when you put them all together in one, sometimes there's a little too much pepper in the soup, and this is what happened today.
Well, I think that actually depicts hackers really well. I mean, they're a weird bunch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we are at the mercy of the hackers and the breaches of the week. But so far, hackers have not been letting us down. The breaches have continued to be interesting. This has been a Bourbon and Breaches by Hack Notice. If you like what you saw today, like, follow, tweet, tick, and talk, and subscribe. And if you have suggestions for additional content that we should be producing, let us know. Until then, tune in next week for another Bourbon and Breaches. Bye, everyone.
Cheers.
Bye, guys.